welcome to the show. Thank you.
Thank you.
I notice you're not in a suit and tie, and when you came in, you said that you have either been out walking or you've had previous appointments, so you're right in off the sidewalk, so to speak.
This is what I wear when I knock on doors and go to neighborhoods. It's like one fellow told me a while back, says, when you walk the the poorer neighborhoods, do not carry a clipboard. It's bad enough that you have glasses. I mean, when you carry a clipboard, don't be in a suit and don't wear black shoes.
Because of the pocket protector and the little tape? Or?
They get, more recent immigrants get afraid with good reason. Because, so if you don't go looking like ICE or immigration.
Oh, I see. I was going with the computer geek look. I'm sorry.
No,
I was going a completely different direction.
Don't look like you're the law. Don't look like you're immigration. Look like your fellow who's not going to avoid asking for votes.
You know, just before we came on the air, we were talking about knocking on doors and what you've been facing down at the county office as far as pronunciations of names and voters and who's registered where and how you find them. Let's get to that in a minute, but first I want to introduce you to the viewers as a congressional candidate, District 10. It's been redistricted 2010 with the census.
Every 10 years.
So we have a new district now, and I've spoken with a couple of people about where that district is, but go ahead and give us a brief overview of that district.
Well, I like this district. The mandate for the Citizens Commission was to make communities of interest cohesive and to not and to make them geographically tight. So this district is all of Stanislaus plus Tracy, Manteca, Escalon, Ripon, Banta, and Bernales. So I can be anywhere in this district in 40 minutes except for LaGrange, which takes an hour. And I have been all over this district, and it's not like traveling from here to Morgan Hill just to talk to voters. So this is a good thing.
It's interesting, too, because when it comes to redistricting, it's not just about the population, although that is a major factor, but you said communities of interest. It has to make sure that there are certain amounts of municipal advisory committees and communities of interest within each district, so one district doesn't get more than the other. Is that correct?
They took a lot of things into consideration, but one of the hurdles they had to overcome was that certain counties have special designations under the Voter Rights Act, which I think includes Merced and possibly Union. So they have to make sure that those counties stay complete. So then with those in place, they have to move borders around them. Now, San Joaquin County was only 17,000 votes short of qualifying as itself, but then there was a problem with what to do with Stanislaus, because Stanislaus needed another 130,000. So they carved off the southern end of San Joaquin County and made this district. I was initially annoyed because I was gearing my campaign up for that, but I visited every municipality in Stanislaus and many 95 different municipal board meetings and so on, and I've talked to a lot of people. I really like this district.
Speaking of talking to people, I do want to address what we were talking about just before we came on the air, and that is knocking on doors and talking to voters. You went down to the county office and talked with Lee,
yes.
And she has a show here also. I think it's every couple of weeks. And what did she tell you when it comes to getting those voter, I can't even remember now what they're called, when you print it out and you get all the voters within your district?
Well, they call it their voter file, which I purchased last August, and I probably need to get an updated one. But the voter file, in some instances, does not show the accent marks, which are an essential part of the names of many of the voters, especially the Hispanic voters, tildes or accents, and those tell you which syllables to emphasize. And in the case of the tildes, it's whether it's Munoz or Munoz, which is important if you're saying hello to somebody and maybe you don't want to mispronounce their name. But that's not in the database, so I have to guess on that.
So how did she greet you with that question? I mean, are they going to be changing that?
She says it is, depending on what Microsoft Word has, and I think Microsoft Word has the ability to do that, but I don't think they can get to it enough. So we'll see if she thinks about it. And that would be nice, because it's always good to pronounce people's names correctly.
Yeah, especially if you're knocking on their door wanting
Yes.
their vote. Yes.
And of course, there is the Sikh population. There's a substantial Sikh population in this district. These are hardworking people, and they vote, and they have, they take care of their homes, and their names are sometimes complex for me. So I need to find someone who can explain how to pronounce every Sikh name, so that I can do a better job of that.
Well, you can always write in here or contact me at Athens Abell at AOL, and I'll pass that on to Michael. So,
Okay.
Michael Barkley.
Thank you.
Or we can get your contact information. They can contact you directly too. Which, oh my goodness, you brought a whole file. So, I'm not trying to get you off the air yet. Okay. Oh, hey, that's big enough print that I can see it. Okay, MJ Barkl at inreach.com. Why did you go with Barkl instead of Barkley?
That's what they assigned me at the phone company 20 years ago.
Oh, okay. So, because InReach, I don't see that very often either. So,
It used to be a small ISP in Stockton, and the name is still out there, but they got gobbled up by a bunch of other people.
well, let's get right to where you stand. I saw a forum the other day where you said that you were the only progressive up there. All 5 candidates were there, and there were a couple of Republicans, a Democrat, an independent, and you. And you said that you were the only progressive, and everybody else was conservative.
Yes.
What do you consider a progressive Democrat?
As I see it, a progressive Democrat is a person who listens, who finds solutions to the problems that affect the real people, the poor and the middle class, who comes up with lists of things as to how to fix the problem that they're facing. And I have an extensive quantity of those on my website. I've been collecting them and inventing them as I needed. But on the other hand, the conservatives seem to like things the way they are, or to go back in time the way the things they think they used to be.
The way they think they used to be?
Yes, they keep forgetting about things like penicillin and roads and cars and things like that. They all seem to have this, or a lot of them seem to have this fixation with the time that never was.
I feel kind of an undertone of, not necessarily an accusation, but kind of a veiled, the people who talk about the Founding Fathers. Is that what you're kind of alluding to?
Well, I have the greatest respect for the Founding Fathers, but things have changed. With Marbury versus Madison, the Supreme Court bootstrapped itself into interpreting the Constitution. It wasn't. And 50 years later, the successive courts decided, yes, that was a good idea. So the Constitution has been modified by the Supreme Court for 150 years. And of course, the legislature, Congress, has changed things too. So we are a little bit ways away from what was originally in the Constitution. Times have progressed in terms of infrastructure, transportation, and communications, and so on. But the interpretations of the laws have changed. And so the New Deal would not have come into effect under the previous conservative kind of thinking. Herbert Hoover would not have done that. And a lot of what I hear from conservative people like Mr. Dunn, they want to go back to where government is not part of your life.
What do you mean it's not part of your life?
They want government to be over there and not pester you, not bother you, and not put regulations on you, and not fix things except for the water in case of the Exchequer Dam on Merced. That one he likes. So some things he likes, some things he doesn't.
Well, I want to hear what you like and what you don't like, since you're the one sitting here. Do you like the progression that the country has taken? I mean, do you want to see it continue the way it's gone, or do you want to stop overreach of government? Or I should ask, do you think that there is overreach of government?
There's often overreach, but the last 4 years have been just terrible for the middle class and the poor. We need to fix that. We need to bring the jobs back from overseas. For the last century or so, the key to the middle class has been unions. And unions are have their backs to the wall. They've been chopped to pieces by outsourcing and deregulation and all of that other stuff. We need to strengthen unions so we can bring the jobs back. We need to bring the jobs back so we can strengthen the unions. For people who do not have degrees, the unions are the route into the middle class. Those are my top two priorities: bring the jobs back, strengthen the unions. My third priority is to solve all of California's water problems with one single federal bill, and I have a draft of that on my website.
What is it?
I happen to have it right here. This is an outline,
Thank you.
29 million acre-feet of storage. This will solve every problem that we have.
It's interesting how you have things on your website, because I did check it out, and it seems very organized and very analytical. What is your political background?
I ran for city council in Manteca 2 decades ago. I got a lot of votes, but came in fourth and didn't have 3 slots open. I got started in politics when I moved to Manteca and found out that the city had been selling the same drainage capacity to successive developers over and over again. And as a result of that, there was flooding clear across town following each of the drains, including in our apartment complex that we bought. So I got together with neighbors clear across town, and we pestered the heck out of them. And eventually they spent $3 million fixing everybody's problems except ours. And they did reduce ours, but it hasn't been fixed. That's where I got my start. And I attended every city council meeting, every planning commission meeting for about 4 years, and learned the ropes. And county boards of supervisors meeting, various commissions, and so on. I walked precincts for Pat Malberg, who was a delightful lady 2 decades ago on 2 different elections. I qualified 3 local initiatives, door to door, which is where I learned to do that. And after that, I worked on a graffiti abatement problem for several years until the city took it over. I also did some environmental litigation. When they wanted to widen the bypass, I said, you can't do that without fixing this problem. So they wound up, and the problem was that we kept running into each other in the fog and killing each other. So they wound up by putting message boards out there, and a few months later, there was the nasty pileup in Coalinga with the dust, and all of a sudden, message boards were all over California. Well, I like to think that my settlement was part of that, but they never said so. I was grateful that Caltrans did that. I've been an active litigant in water rights litigation in western Glen and Kahama County with no particular success, but there's a ton of stuff on my website about that. And one of the things I like to do in Congress is straighten that out, not to my own advantage, but to the advantage of all the people in 70 square miles of strictly contracts.
Speaking of water, bringing it back locally, what do you think of the water sale from Modesto Irrigation District to San Francisco?
If this plan were put in place, the water sale would come back. If this plan were in place, we would pick up 29 million acre-feet of additional storage, and they could move water all over the place to where it's needed, and it would not hurt anyone.
Do you think that there are other plans that we don't know about concerning the water and the state of California?
Everybody has a plan. Jerry Brown has a plan. Let's put either a pipe or a peripheral canal. And this plan kind of makes the peripheral canal irrelevant because it does the west side conveyance system down the west side of the valley, including the largest single reservoir, 12 million acre-feet, in the hills west of where our ranch is. It lengthens the Folsom South Canal from the American River on down through San Joaquin County, and it hooks it in Bethany also. It adds additional storage at Oristimba and at Los Baños Grande and wherever else they want in Southern California. It adds the Temperance Flat Reservoir on San Joaquin. So everywhere there are water shortages, it adds storage. And the reason this is necessary is because in 1861-62, we had a succession of storms. Starting December 9th, 1861. Those 3 storms dumped or produced the equivalent of 110 to 120% of the entire annual runoff in 3.5 weeks. There was a lake in the middle of the valley, 30 feet deep, 300 miles long, which I think would include this spot. We would be underwater here because 2.1 million acre feet would come roaring down the Tuolumne, and unless by some fluke Don Pedro was empty at that point. I brought that up with MID the other day, and they said it's not a problem. Well, it would be their problem if they got a phone call at 4 in the morning saying, we got 8 feet of water in our offices, and there's body parts from Waterford in there, and what do you want us to do? So I think it is their problem, but it's everybody's problem.
Do you attend the MID meetings?
I have attended a few of them. I have attended meetings all over both counties, a number of different irrigation district meetings, conservation districts, school boards, cities, planning commissions, various other agencies.
A minute ago, I gave my contact information, Athens Abell at AOL.com, and you have contact information too, but we'll get to that in just a second. I'm still not putting you off the air yet, because I have some people who contact me when they know who's coming on. I try to send out some, pre-guest interviews and letting my viewers know who will be the guest the following week. And one of those questions that came in was specifically for you about gun control.
Yes.
What is your stand on gun control?
We are shooting too many people in this country. Guns are too easy to get, and there's too many of them. I've drafted legislation.
Too many guns or too many people?
Too many guns. I've drafted legislation that I believe threads the needle on the problem. It allows people to retain their guns for hunting and for self-defense, but it closes most of the doors into the black market. That's on my website, about the bottom half of it. But to do that, with the way the Supreme Court has been behaving since the Heller decision in 2008 and the McDonald decision in 2010, the right to keep and bear arms would need to be repealed.
So a private owner living in a single dwelling home would have the right to own guns?
If my legislation were put into place, they would have the privilege to own guns, just like driving a car.
There's a difference between privilege and right.
Yes, the right goes away, it then becomes a privilege. Because if you have people like Jared Loeffner in Tucson, he had an absolute right to the gun that he used to shoot Gabrielle Gifford and Judge Roll, one of the most esteemed federal judges in the country. He had an absolute right to that gun. You could go in any gun shop and buy it. Only the guy behind the counter at Walmart decided he was a little buggy and wouldn't sell him ammunition, so they went to Walmart. But until he is adjudicated as some sort of person with mental problems, he had an absolute right. And the effect is people get shot all the time. In Florida, with George Zimmerman's little problem, if he had not had a gun with him, I'm guessing, but I believe he would have handled that in a different way. Might have stayed in his car and waited for the police. Might have been friendlier when he accosted the young man. Without a gun, the young man would not have died.
Okay, playing devil's advocate here for just a minute. Just say that through your legislation, this goes through. Who decides who has the privilege to own a gun and who does not?
Well, as I wrote the constitutional amendment, Congress would have the power to regulate guns as they chose. Now, things go into the hopper in Washington, and they go in as an orange and they come out as a pumpkin or an apple. So things get changed. But in case anybody is anxious about how I feel about this, my goal would be to go to Washington, put the bills in the hopper, make the speeches, and sit back and wait, because I think this country is not ready to do that. There are too many people in this country who like their guns more than they like the lives of the 10,000 people who get killed by guns in this country every year. And until the people of this country decide that we've had enough, we need to do something, it will continue like that, maybe 50 years.
Again, playing the advocate on the other side, since they're not here and they asked me to ask you these questions. Do you have the figures of how many people are killed by baseball bats or by a car?
I understand cars were down to close to 30,000 per year, it was up over 50,000. It is possible to reduce that with the cars because we have the technology to make cars that will refuse to run into anyone. Each of these things, and I don't know about the baseball bat figures, but each of these things are worthy of exploration. We've gone to seat belts and airbags and side bars in the doors and better bumpers. We've slowly been progressing on that. But with firearms, we're up against the wall, and the wall is the Supreme Court.
Which brings me to my next question, and that is back to the overreach of government. There have been laws instituted, laws upon laws upon laws, and law after law after law for the public safety. At which point do we stop making the laws and start instituting common sense to the American people?
That is a very good question. I have a number of proposals on my website, some of which are complete in themselves, and some of which are outlines of things to look at. My goal is not to encumber the world with more laws. My goal is to solve problems of inequity and unfairness, and to support the poor and the middle class, and restore our economy. Someone else might look at my proposals and say, oh, we can't do it, that's too much law. And they're perfectly entitled.
Okay, we're ready for your contact information. I see you have a telephone number here, so
yes.
Go ahead and give your telephone number, because you've referred to your website several times. But I know that you are completely and totally accessible. I have talked to you several times, both through email and on the phone, and those of you out there, you can give him a call, and you're very easy to get a hold of and talk to. So I really appreciate that. So your phone number?
823-4817. And I'm the only person who answers that phone. There is a machine on there, and if you leave your name and number, I'll get back to you. Because during the day, I'm usually out knocking on doors.
And your website?
mjbark.com/run, as a run for Congress, run.htm. And that has my complete platform on it, and it links to my biography and a photograph and the water plan and the health plan and the budget.
It's quite extensive. Like I said, I did look at it the other day. Easy to read, though.
Good.
Yeah, it was very easy to read. And you're on Facebook.
Yes. On my website, I do my own programming, and I did it. I learned 12 years ago, before 9/11, because I was working on water rights litigation. I needed to make it so that people in dial-up out in the hills could download it. So it is extremely simple HTML. So it'll come up on your Droid phone and anything else, except for the parts that are PDFs.
Thank you very much. I would like to have you back soon to talk about the Patriot Act. So thank you.
Anytime.